It starts there. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. Other boats were with him, and then they disappear from the story. I don't know, maybe they didn't want to make the journey, maybe it got a bit perilous and they turned back, we don't know. But we do know that Jesus wanted to get across to the other side at night time, at a time of the year when storms were known to happen. Now, Jesus had had a hard day. We read in Mark chapter 4 that he had spent the whole day teaching. And it said that he was out in a boat away from the shore, because it said in Mark chapter 3 that the people wanted to hear what Jesus had to say so much that they would have crushed him. So he made a gap between him and the people by a little bit of shore, and there he was on the boat. But I think, and it seems to me, that Jesus had been there more than just one day. He'd been there many days, because it says in the previous chapter also that the people were so keen to hear what Jesus had to say, so keen to be healed, so keen to see the demons cast out, that Jesus and the disciples didn't even have time to eat. So Jesus was probably exhausted. Many days teaching the people, many days healing. And so when they went out on that journey, is it a surprise that he fell asleep? Now, it was the middle of the night, or possibly sometime during the night, certainly after evening. So probably many of the disciples fell asleep. Chances are the boat they were in held about 15 people. They found archaeological evidences of boats of that time that held around about 15 people. Not particularly big boats, but big enough. Enough to, for them to lie down in if they needed to. Jesus, it says, had his pillow on the helmsman pillow at the front there. Where does it say? He was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. Now, Jesus was smarter than me, because the stern is the place you go to, because that's the most stable part of the boat, especially if you're going to go into a storm. When we were about 5 years ago, as a family, we went down to Tasmania, to Bruny Island. Has anybody here been to Bruny Island? Yes. Now, when you go down to Bruny Island, you can go on an adventure cruise. That's it. You go out to some southernmost point. It's not the southernmost point, but it's pretty south. When you're actually in the boat, they say if you go south, the next stop is Antarctica. There's nothing but ocean. And on a lovely day, it would have been beautiful. Sea lions, dolphins, idyllic. The day that we went, unfortunately, started out lovely and ended up a little bit like the trip for Jesus across the Lake of Galilee. So we went across on the barge, we went across to Bruny Island, and we got to the point where the tourism part happens. And on these boats, they have about 40 normally. And some people hadn't turned up because the weather was pretty bad. And they'd had a morning cruise, and they said to us, you know what? The weather's not real good. It's actually getting worse. We're happy just to cancel this and give you your money back. Unfortunately, enough of us decided that no, we'd come this way and we wanted our cruise out to see those sea lions. And so about a dozen or so brave souls, stupid souls, brave souls, we climbed aboard. And most of them, smarter than me, went to the stern, the stable part of the boat. But no, not two of my boys. I don't remember which two, but they wanted to be up the front. Now, when you go on this, you do get wet anyway, regardless of the weather. So they kit you up with wet weather stuff, pants, shoes, coats, hats, gloves, beanies, the whole bit. It's pretty cold. It's pretty rainy, but today was particularly bad. So everybody, the sensible ones, they were near the driver of the boat at the stern, and me and two of my boys were at the front, pounding away in the waves, and the wind came up and the rain came up, and we got absolutely drenched. And I don't know whether they were having a good time, but I was not. I was not enjoying this at all. Made it especially bad because I was worried about my phone, so I'd pop my phone in my back pocket, thinking that's the safest place. And as I pounded my way across the ocean, I smashed my phone as well. Yeah, they put a dampener on that whole day for me, to be honest. I'm over it now, just. Derek doesn't think that I'm really over it. I've had a few phones since then. But that was nothing that was nothing compared to the storm that these disciples came across. They had a boat half that size. They had waves twice that high. And the Bible makes it very clear that a great storm arose. And it says that a great windstorm arose and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. So if they weren't awake when they started their journey, they were awake now. But not Jesus. He was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and they said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased and there was a great calm. It went from a great storm, one where the disciples thought that they were going to die, and it ended in a great calm. And what happened to make that come to be was Jesus standing and speaking to the elements. Peace, be still. And they were afraid. They were afraid before, but when they saw this happen, when they saw Jesus speak, they were terribly afraid. It says they were filled with great fear. Now, there's a lot to learn in this story about who Jesus is. Who Jesus is. Because Jesus was in every way man. He was dead to the world. I can sleep anywhere. I can pretty much, if I'm tired, I can lie down on these stone blocks and I can fall asleep. But if the wind comes up or the rain comes up, I'm awake. But Jesus was absolutely haggard. He had been to the end of himself. In his humanness, he was sound asleep. Because Jesus was in every way human. He was born just like we are. In mysterious circumstances, yes, but born just like we are. He grew up just like we grew up. And he experienced everything that we did. He experienced suffering. He experienced pain, joy, sadness, thirst, hunger, tiredness. But there was more to Jesus than just the man. And they knew that already. They knew that Jesus was in some way extraordinary. They heard the demons as they cried out, "Holy One of God, come away from me." And they heard the demons when they say, "You are the Son of God." They would have been with Jesus when he healed the paralytic. When he said, "Your sins are forgiven." And the Pharisee says, "Who can forgive sins but God?" And Jesus said in Mark chapter 2, "I will show you that the Son of Man has authority even to forgive sins. Stand up and walk," and he did. And they would have been amazed. They would have seen the teachings of Jesus at the seaside, healing people, casting out demons. They had an idea. Who was this? The Messiah, the Son of God? And then a next level thing happens. A man stands up and speaks to the elements and says, "Quiet, be still." Now we read from Psalms today. Psalm 65. It says he quietened the raging sea. This is talking about God. Psalm 89. Lord, you subdue the tossed waves. Psalm 93. Lord, you are mightier than the waves of the sea. And Psalm 107, which I'm going to read for you now. They would have had these psalms in their mind when they saw this amazing thing happen. Psalm 107, verse 23 starts, "Some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the great waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep. For he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven, they went down to the depths, their courage melted away in their evil plight. They reeled and staggered like drunken men. They are at their wits' end. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. Then they were glad that the waters were quiet, and he brought them to their desired haven. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man." These were the psalms that they would have had in their mind when they saw Jesus, the man, stand up and use the power of God. Quiet, be still. And so they said to themselves, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Who then is this that even the wind and the seas obey them? And that's something we all have to wrestle with ourselves. Who is Jesus? Was he just a man? Was he just a prophet? Was he the Son of God? Was he, as we believe, as most Christians believe, God incarnate, God with skin on, in every way man, in every way God? So what are the takeaways for today? What are the things that we can apply this story to? Well, I think there's three things that maybe we can look at. The first one is the fact that we are going to face storms. We are going to go into storms. Now, if you can see a storm on the horizon, or if you see it on the radar, if you have to drive somewhere, the wise thing to do is to either wait the storm out, go around the storm, if you can. But sometimes there are storms that we have to go through. Storms of life that we have to face. And these disciples, on this occasion, Jesus actually led them right into the storm. He said, "Let's go to the other side. Let's go to the other side." And I think the reason that he did that, because there was something that they needed to learn that they could only learn in the storm. They could only see Jesus at that next level, who he presented himself to be, in the storm. He had to be in that moment where all seemed lost, for them to see him control the elements. That could only happen in that storm. So if you are in a storm right now, maybe you can ask, what is happening? What does God want me to learn from this? Is he refining me? Is he making me more like him? And the big question to ask is, where is God in this? Where is God in this? Because here's the second thing. God is with you in the storm. Jesus hadn't left the boat. We know Jesus can walk on water. There's stories about that. If he'd wanted to, he could have just hopped out and wandered away, I guess. No, there he was. He was in the boat with him. They didn't like his timing. They didn't like that he was asleep. But he hadn't gone anywhere. He had something bigger planned for them. He, at the right time, calmed that storm. And God, at the right time, will do the things that he needs to do for us in our situation. He hasn't left us. Isaiah 43:2 says, "Though you walk through the deep waters, I will be with you." Make no mistake, you will face deep waters. You will face storms. But don't doubt that God is with you. Jesus was with them in the boat. And here's the last thing. They doubted God's care. Yes, God was with them. Jesus was with them in the boat. But did he really care? That's what they were wondering. And they said to themselves, they said to Jesus when they woke him, "Teacher, Master, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now that word there, perishing, sometimes that's translated as, "Do you not care that we will drown, that we will die?" But the Greek there is apolumi, which means, do you not care that we will be destroyed? Do you not care that we will be carried down to the deep and we will be heard of no more? They doubted God's care. They doubted Jesus' care. And I think that's why Jesus said to them after he had finished, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" I think if they'd woken up Jesus and they said, "Jesus, help us. We're in a bad situation," that maybe he might have responded differently. Maybe. But they didn't. They came with an accusation. They came with fear instead of faith. And they said, "Don't you care? Don't you care?" And that can happen to all of us, and maybe understandably when we are in a storm of life. We look to God and we think, "Don't you care?" We start to question his character. Is God really good? Does God really care? Is God really faithful? Will God really get me through this? Now I've got to put a proviso on that. Because you know what? There will be a storm of life that you enter that you won't leave. And each one of those disciples ended up giving up their lives, except for maybe one, for the cause, for Jesus. They entered a storm at one stage and they were killed because they followed Jesus. They entered a storm that they didn't leave. But that doesn't mean that God wasn't with them. That doesn't mean that God didn't care. God called them into that, and that was their destiny. And this is the reason why I think that we can trust God. This is the reason why I think we can know that God cares for us. Because that is why Jesus came. Jesus came because he cared. Jesus came because we are perishing. Without Jesus, our eternity is not assured. Without Jesus, we do not know the way forward. Jesus said, I am the way. I will show you the way to the Father. I am the truth. I will reveal to you what life is all about. And I am the life. I will bring you into eternity. I will bring you to the other side. Eventually, we will all meet Jesus on the other side. Jesus cares. He will bring us through. It says in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, Jesus says, the Son of Man came to be served. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus cared. Jesus still cares. Jesus cared enough to die for us. Jesus cared enough to come to earth, show us what God was like, take the sins of the world upon him, and then defeat death and sin and show us the way forward. This is the God we serve. This is the God who is with us. This is the God who cares enough to die for us.